He held me tighter every time I said I couldn't get out of bed. That morning, I was on the bathroom floor, still shaking, the taste of a panic attack metallic in my mouth. He knocked on the door, calm as always. He told me he loved me, exactly like this. Fragile, raw, dependent. His love felt like comfort, but it tasted like captivity. And I, dizzy and ashamed, thanked him for staying. I was just another victim confusing protection with control, care with possession, love with emotional abuse. In the beginning, David told me he was drawn to my sensitivity. You feel everything so deeply. I like fixing broken things, he said once, laughing softly. I smiled back, pretending I hadn't heard the word broken echo in my chest. Those first few months were a performance. He played the role of the rescuer, the emotionally intelligent man who held me through my sobs and kissed my scars. But what I didn't realize was that he was feeding those wounds. He needed me injured. That was the only version of me he knew how to love. Things got worse after I lost my job. I thought he'd support me. Instead, he said, "It's better this way. Now you have more time to focus on yourself." But what he really meant was, "Now you depend on me for everything." He began controlling my debit card, my phone password, even what I wore. "This outfit doesn't reflect your emotional state," he said one morning, as he pulled a dress off my body and threw it in the trash. I stood in front of the mirror wearing what he chose, and I couldn't tell where his will ended and mine began. It wasn't support. It was control. Pure manipulation masked as concern. The most dangerous form of psychological abuse. During dinners with friends, he'd make jokes like, "She's my little broken doll," while pouring more wine into my glass without asking. When I tried to speak, he'd interrupt, stroking my leg possessively, smiling. "She's still learning how to trust again." Everyone would laugh, thinking it was romantic. No one noticed the gaslighting happening in real time. At home afterward, he'd lock the bedroom door and ask me to repeat everything I'd said that night, word for word. If I forgot something or said it wrong, he'd fall silent. Not for minutes, but for days. The silent treatment was his favorite punishment. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed to disappear emotionally, until I came crawling back, begging for his love again. He always returned when I was small enough to fit in his arms again. One time, I posted a picture smiling at a cafe with an old friend. Within minutes, he texted, "You don't look like someone struggling with trauma." When I got home, he was sitting in the dark. He didn't say anything for hours. He just looked at me like I'd cheated on him emotionally. And then finally, he whispered, "I thought I was the only thing that made you feel better." His need to be the cure meant I had to stay sick. That's the trap of narcissistic abuse. You become addicted to the very person who's poisoning you. The final time I tried to leave, I packed my bags in silence while he slept. My heart was racing, my hands shaking, but he woke up. He sat on the edge of the bed, calm, and said, "You can't even cross the street without me." The words paralyzed me. I stood there with my suitcase in hand, then slowly sank to the floor. He walked over, pulled me into his lap, and held me like a child. "You're mine," he whispered. "There's no version of you that works without me." And in that moment, the terror somehow felt like comfort. That's the twisted reality of a toxic relationship with a narcissist. Control feels like love, because they've broken every other part of you. The pain made you mine, and that's where you'll stay. You don't need to be happy. You just need me. The worst part isn't what he did to me. It's how long I believed I needed to stay broken to be loved. Maybe I still believe it. I wish I could say I ran that night, that I found the strength to walk out and never look back. But I didn't. I crawled into bed beside him, like nothing had happened. I let him hold me while I disappeared further into myself. Narcissistic abuse isn't just manipulation. It's a slow erasure of who you are, a quiet daily undoing. By the time I realized what was happening, I couldn't recognize my own voice anymore. I stopped calling my friends. Not because he told me to. He never had to. It was the way he looked at me after every call. The way he'd say, "You always seem more distant after you talk to them." Or, "They don't understand you like I do." Little by little, I isolated myself, thinking I was protecting our relationship. But I wasn't protecting love. I was obeying control. I began second-guessing everything. My decisions, my feelings, my memories. He made me question things I'd lived myself. Once, after a fight, I told him he'd raised his voice and scared me. He smiled calmly and said, "That never happened." You're being dramatic again. That's how gaslighting works. You start to believe that your trauma isn't real, that maybe you are the problem. And he reinforced it daily with phrases like, "You're lucky I'm patient," or "Anyone else would have left you by now." The emotional abuse didn't leave bruises. It left echoes. I'd sit in the car outside our apartment for hours, just so I didn't have to walk into the silence he used as punishment. He'd ignore me for days, moving around the house like I didn't exist. And when I finally broke down crying, he'd smile and say, "See, you always come back. You need me." There was one night I'll never forget. A family dinner. I wore a black blouse he had once said made me look too confident. I wore it anyway. At the table, he barely spoke to me. But in the car on the way home, he exploded. Not in yelling, but in that cold, surgical way that only narcissists master. "You look desperate tonight," he said, "trying so hard to prove you're someone you're not." He didn't speak to me for 3 days after that. Not a word. The treatment of silence wrapped around me like a noose, and I found myself apologizing for simply existing in my own skin. That was the moment I knew. He didn't love me. He loved my weakness. He loved my silence. He loved my dependence. The more broken I was, the more in control he felt, and I had become a perfect victim, shaped by trauma, starved for affection, desperate for the crumbs he threw my way and called love. I don't remember the exact day I stopped loving him. I only remember waking up and realizing I didn't know who I was, only who he had taught me to be. Fragile, guilty, small. He had convinced me that without him I'd fall apart. But the truth was, I had already fallen apart, and he was the one who broke me. Now, I'm learning to live without his voice in my head. But even now, sometimes I still hear it. "You'll never be enough for anyone else. No one else will ever understand the mess you are." It's been months since I left, but some days I still sit on the edge of my bed and wonder if he was right. That's the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. The trauma lingers even when the abuser is gone. It's not just healing. It's rebuilding yourself from ash and doubt. He only loved me when I was broken, and I'm still trying to love the parts of me he taught me to hate. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to be punished. It's muscle memory now, opening my eyes and scanning the silence to see if it's safe to breathe, safe to speak, safe to move. With David, silence was never peace. It was a loaded weapon. If he didn't speak to me when I brought him coffee, it meant I'd done something wrong. If he answered in monosyllables, I knew I'd be sleeping alone that night, crying into a pillow while he scrolled through his phone like I didn't exist. That was the rhythm of the relationship. Affection followed by withdrawal, kindness followed by punishment. A toxic cycle of control disguised as love. And me, the forever apologizing victim of emotional abuse. He had this way of keeping me off balance. One day, he'd say I was the love of his life, that no one had ever understood him like I did. The next, he'd call me pathetic, oversensitive, too damaged to ever function properly. I began to believe both, that I was his soulmate and his burden, his mirror and his mess. That's how narcissistic manipulation works. It splits your self-worth in two and hands you only the broken half. I remember the day I tried to speak up. Just once. It was over something so small. He'd made a sarcastic comment about how I looked healthier since I stopped eating, and I said quietly, "That hurt." He laughed. Not the kind of laugh that invites you in, but the kind that cuts you down. "You're too soft for this world," he said. "If you weren't so broken, I wouldn't have to be like this." He turned his back, and that was the end of the conversation. Hours later, I was the one apologizing. That night, I stood in the shower, arms wrapped around myself, trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. But even water couldn't wash off the words. That's the thing about psychological abuse. It's invisible. No bruises, just echoes. A voice that follows you everywhere, even when he's not in the room. At his best, he was charming, funny, magnetic, full of grand ideas and big words about healing and growth. He quoted books about trauma and therapy, used terms like inner child and emotional maturity to prove how evolved he was. But when it came to my pain, he minimized it. When I cried, he rolled his eyes. When I opened up, he looked at the clock. "You're not the only one with trauma," he'd say. "You think everything revolves around your feelings." It was gaslighting layered with spiritual superiority, the cruelest combination of all. He weaponized empathy, turned therapy language into another form of control, made me feel guilty for needing space, for wanting boundaries. If you loved me, you wouldn't need so much distance. That was his favorite line. And so I stayed close, even when my body was screaming to run. That's what victims of narcissistic abuse do. We shrink ourselves to stay loved, to stay chosen, to stay alive in someone else's version of love. Once, at a family gathering, I made a joke, an innocent one, and people laughed. David didn't. Later in the car, he was quiet. I knew that quiet. It wasn't disappointment. It was rage in disguise. When we got home, he slammed the door and said, "You humiliated me." I tried to explain. He didn't let me. Just walked away, muttering, "Maybe you're more like your mother than you think." A phrase designed to destroy. He knew my mother was my deepest wound. He used it anyway. That night, he slept like a baby. I didn't sleep at all. The control wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in questions. Are you really going to wear that? Why do you always have to talk so much? Don't you think it's weird how you're always the one upset? Little knives. Each one made me smaller, quieter, easier to handle. The perfect puppet for a narcissist who needed me to exist only in his shadow. He once told me, "I only ever wanted the broken parts of you. The rest made me feel small." I didn't understand it then. Now I do. A narcissist doesn't want a partner. He wants an echo. Someone to reflect his power, to feed his illusion, to collapse when he needs to feel strong. I wasn't a woman to him. I was a mirror he used to admire himself, and when the reflection cracked, he punished me for it. The day I left wasn't cinematic. It wasn't brave or loud. It was cold, quiet, desperate. I waited for him to go out to run errands. I packed 2 bags. I didn't leave a note. I didn't cry. I just left. And as the elevator doors closed, I expected to feel free. But what I felt was guilt. That's what years of abuse do to you. They make you feel guilty for saving yourself. I've been gone for a year now. I've moved cities. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to reclaim my voice. But healing from narcissistic abuse isn't linear. Some days I feel powerful. Other days I feel haunted. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still over-explain. I still wait for punishment when I say what I feel. That's the trauma talking. That's the residue of control. People ask why I stayed, why I didn't leave sooner, but they don't understand. When a narcissist chooses you, they don't chain you. They convince you you've already locked yourself in. They don't say, "You can't live without me." They make you say it. I did. I whispered it to myself for years. But now, I'm whispering something else. He only loved me when I was broken. But I'm learning to love myself whole. And maybe one day, that voice will be louder than his ever was. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks of me. Not out of longing, that part of me is gone, but out of sheer disbelief. How someone could cause that much damage and walk away without a scratch. Narcissists don't carry scars. They leave them. They don't look back at the wreckage. They just move on, already searching for their next victim. Someone softer, younger maybe, more open to confusion. Someone who hasn't yet learned to question manipulation dressed as intimacy. David never hit me. People still ask that, like physical violence is the only real kind. No, he never laid a hand on me, just on my reality. He bent it until I didn't trust my own instincts, until I questioned every feeling that came up inside me. That's the cruelty of emotional abuse. It rewires your brain. It teaches you that pain is love, and control is safety. By the time I left, I didn't even know if I could trust a green light to mean go. There were days, so many days, when I thought I was going insane. He'd deny entire conversations, twist timelines, say I was projecting or too emotional. If I tried to show him a message, he'd say I misread the tone. If I quoted him, he'd swear he never said it. The gaslighting wasn't constant. It was precise, surgical, enough to keep me confused, just uncertain enough to stay. I remember sitting on the floor of our bedroom once, holding my phone, rereading our messages over and over, trying to find proof that I wasn't losing my mind. That's what it comes to when you're deep inside a toxic relationship with a narcissist. You start looking for evidence that your reality exists. And when I would finally break, when I collapsed into tears or begged him to just see me, he'd act like I was the abuser. He'd say I was unstable, impossible to please. He'd walk out, claiming he needed space to breathe. And I'd sit in the echo of his absence, wondering if I was too much, too broken, too everything. But now I see it. It wasn't me. He needed me to be small because my strength threatened him. He needed me broken because healed women don't beg. He needed me anxious because calmness is too clear, too aware. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every withdrawal of affection, every passive-aggressive sigh, every night he left me in silence, it was all part of the control. And still, even now, some nights I miss the feeling of being loved by him. Not the real love, that never existed, but the illusion. The dopamine hit of a rare compliment. The high of being told, "You're the only one who gets me," after a week of silence. Narcissistic abuse isn't just emotional, it's chemical. Your body becomes addicted to chaos, to the cycle of cruelty and reward. It's a trauma bond, and it's terrifyingly hard to break. I've dated since him, slowly, carefully, but it's hard. I flinch at kindness. I brace for punishment after joy. I apologize too much. I downplay my needs. I expect to be punished for being inconvenient. That's the kind of damage narcissists leave. Not bruises, but behavioral scars. One man told me, "You act like you're always on trial." And maybe I am. Because for years, I lived under cross-examination. Every word, every look, every silence, interpreted, questioned, picked apart. I became my own surveillance camera, scanning myself for flaws before he could find them first. That doesn't go away overnight. That kind of trauma lingers like smoke in your lungs. But I'm learning that I don't need to earn love by breaking myself into smaller pieces. Learning that silence isn't safety, it's suffocation. Learning that real love doesn't come with conditions or fear. It doesn't ask you to disappear to be worthy. It doesn't punish you for existing. One day, I found a message from him, months after I left. Just one line. "I missed the way you needed me." And there it was. The truth. Unmasked. He didn't miss me. He missed the power, the control. The version of me that cried in bathrooms, whispered apologies for breathing too loudly, and clung to him like a lifeline when he was the one pulling me under. I didn't reply. Because I don't need him anymore. And I think that's the only kind of revenge a narcissist truly understands. Healing. Quiet, unshakable healing. But sometimes, when the house is too quiet and the shadows feel long, I still hear his voice. "You're nothing without me." And sometimes, a part of me still believes it. That's the part I'm still trying to save. I don't know how long it takes to fully come back to yourself after narcissistic abuse. Some days I think I'm already there. Other days I catch myself holding my breath in a moment that should be peaceful, and I realize I'm still bracing for impact. Healing is not a straight line. It's a slow, painful untangling of all the lies he planted, and I watered. I keep remembering this one evening, a stupid, insignificant moment, but it won't leave me. We were watching a movie and I laughed at a line. Just laughed. Nothing dramatic. And he paused the film, looked at me and said, "God, you're loud." Not in anger, just cold, flat. That was all it took. One sentence. I didn't laugh again for the rest of the night. I sat perfectly still, heart in my throat, asking myself if I'd embarrassed him. I spent the next week avoiding movies, as if joy itself had become dangerous. That's how narcissistic control works. It's not always big fights or shouting matches. Sometimes it's just silencing joy until you forget how to feel it. I used to wonder why it was so hard to leave, why I stayed, why I forgave, why I kept trying to make it work when I knew, deep down, that it was killing me. Now I know. It wasn't love I was holding on to. It was fear. Fear that no one else would ever love me. Fear that he was right about me. That I really was too sensitive, too broken, too difficult to love. That without him I'd disappear. That's what narcissists do. They don't just destroy your trust in them. They destroy your trust in yourself. And once that's gone, you're trapped. I remember the day I started therapy. I sat on the couch and whispered to the therapist, "I think something's wrong with me. Not with him, with me," because he had convinced me that I was the unstable one, the emotional one, the one who overreacted, misremembered, imagined things that weren't there. It took months, before I could say the words. I was in an abusive relationship, because it didn't look like what I thought abuse was supposed to look like. There were no slaps, No yelling in public, no broken glass, just a slow daily erosion of self, a drip feed of cruelty, a constant pressure to be less emotional, less opinionated, less alive. And when I finally left, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like death, because the only version of myself I'd known for years was the one he created, and she didn't know how to survive outside of him. That's the sick genius of emotional abuse. You walk out with your body intact, but your mind in ruins. And even now, I still clean up the damage. I still jump when someone shuts a door too loudly. I still scan texts for hidden meanings. I still apologize when I haven't done anything wrong. The trauma lives on in the spaces between normal moments. But I also know this. Every time I speak the truth, every time I write it down, the spell breaks a little more. His voice fades, and mine gets stronger. I don't need his permission to exist anymore. I don't need to prove that I'm worthy of gentleness. I am learning how to laugh again without fear. I am learning how to sit in silence without waiting for punishment. I am learning that love should never feel like walking on glass. People say, "You're so strong," but they don't see the nights I lie awake, questioning every memory, every scar, every version of myself I lost along the way. They don't see the ghost of his words still haunting the back of my throat. They don't see the girl who still asks herself, was it really that bad? Yes, it was. And the fact that I still ask that question, even now, is the clearest sign of how deep the damage goes. He only loved me when I was broken, but I'm not broken anymore. Just rebuilding, slowly, painfully, beautifully, into someone he'll never recognize. Some days, I still wake up expecting to be punished, and then I remember, I'm alone, safe, free. But freedom after a relationship with a narcissist doesn't feel like what people imagine. It's not wind in your hair or a sunrise over some metaphorical new life. It's quiet, heavy, confusing, like stepping out of a dark room and realizing your eyes don't know how to process light anymore. There are moments when I catch myself still waiting for his voice, that cruel, calm tone he used when he wanted to undo me without raising his volume. You're too sensitive. You twist everything. Without me, you're nothing. I believed those things, not because they were true, but because he said them so often, and always after breaking me down just enough to make them stick. That's what narcissistic abuse is. Slow, precise destruction, not through chaos, but through control, through repetition, through gaslighting so subtle it makes you question your own name. And still, there were good moments. That's what people never understand. There were soft mornings, long hugs. That one night he cried on the floor and said I saved him. But now I know. Narcissists don't cry because they feel guilt. They cry because they're losing control. He didn't love me. He loved the power he had when I didn't love myself. That's the part that stings most. Realizing how much of me I gave up, just to be loved. Realizing that what I called love was really fear, trauma, addiction. Realizing that I was a victim, not a partner. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back. Not because I'm lost, but because I'm becoming. I'm not who I was before him. That version is gone, but I'm also not who he made me. That puppet, that shadow, that silent thing. She's dying slowly. And me? I'm being born in the aftermath. I don't have all the answers. Healing isn't a checklist. There are still days I flinch at kindness. Days I pull away when someone raises their voice. Days I mourn the version of me he killed. But now, I hold those wounds gently. I don't deny them anymore. He only loved me when I was broken. But I'm learning to love the pieces he never touched. And maybe that's enough, for now. Or maybe that's just the beginning.